Yeah, I'll probably pick up
I
that.
mean, I can pick up the pace, but it's gonna sound like racing,
No,
horses.
I'll pick it up a little bit because it's a little too, it's dragged out a little too much. Sounds like it's a
Are
funeral.
you feeling a little slow today?
Yeah, I am. Bluntly, yeah, we've been highly taxed with activities. So you got a sound level. I think it should be fine.
Well, this little clock says 9:07, and I have a feeling that is inaccurate.
Yeah, that is, it is 49.
Okay.
Pouliot is how to say your last name?
Pouliot.
Pouliot.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
silent T.
The land acknowledgement is buried inside of our statement.
It's within the beginning.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, it's in the early areas.
I'll be cross-eyed.
Okay. Yeah. We just have to, I don't like to be scripted, so I have to be very deliberate and
Yeah.
case
Me
myself.
keeping him to a script is like,
No,
Yeah.
I like to just,
That's good, though. I think that is a more authentic way of speaking as long as you have the ability to do it.
yeah.
I find myself sort of, I tend that way, but yeah, I can't measure the time well. So
Yeah.
I completely relate.
yeah. People have said, hey, can we do a video? Let's do take one, and I can do 15 minutes nonstop and without even a delay. But this stuff, because we're working with one another, I can't do that to her. She can't pick up where I was. No. And I don't like to be scripted because it's the random thoughts come out.
I'm going to leave this here.
Yeah, sometimes as you're talking too, like something comes up and you're like, the threads are, it's more natural, right?
Yeah.
How we communicate.
Yeah, when I do PowerPoint stuff, you let everybody read the slides, but
Good morning. Thank you for joining us for this live stream service in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day at South Church. My name is Jonathan Cummings, and I'm one of a team of worship associates that have the honor of welcoming you to services at South Church. We are joined today by Denise and Paul Pouliot, who will be providing the music and the sermon for today's service. Denise is the head female speaker, Sagamosqua, and Paul is the head male speaker and Grand Chief, Sagamwa, of the Kawasik Band of the Pennacook Abenaki people. South Church is supported by its wonderful staff, Interim Minister Reverend Susan Sahusky Brown, and Director of Life's Band Ministry, Kirsten Hunter. The chancel flowers are given by yesterday's wedding couple, Gabriel Torino and Elizabeth Trevino, who we congratulate on their marriage. Special thanks to Jen Leiden for the videography and tech support for this service.
Good morning. Before we get started this morning, I have a few quick announcements for folks. The search committee at South Church, who are continuing the search for our new settled minister, will be hosting two sessions coming up on October 17th to update the congregation on the search process. The first will be a Zoom session between services at 10:15, and then there will be an in-person session starting at 12:15 immediately following the second worship. That's next week. You can look on our website or in the order of service for more information about that. There's a few things coming up this week. Aging with Grace will be meeting this Wednesday. If you have an interest in joining them, they will be meeting on Zoom starting this coming Wednesday, as will the book discussion is also happening this week. Our morning spiritual poetry practice is on Wednesday mornings every week, so you could join us with that this week as well. There are many announcements in your order of service, or you can go to our website and check out our current newsletter to find out what's going on. And finally, as you know, we're in the midst of our annual budget campaign. We're not together this Sunday, but if you have your new commitment that you'd like to send in, you can always send that into the office. You can go online to the donate page and make contributions directly to the annual budget campaign there. Reach out to staff if you have any questions, and we can put you in touch with the ABC committee. Thanks so much for being with us this morning, and we're in for such a special treat today. Thank you.
I sang Peaceful High, peacefully we reach out, peaceful high, peacefully sit a while. Peaceful high, choose a long peace. Peaceful high, a superior, lasting peace.
We'll now light our chalice, and we light our chalice today with two quotes from Aldo Leopold. We abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. All ethics so far evolved, rest upon a single premise, that the individual is a member of a community of interdependent parts. The land ethic simply enlarges the boundaries of the community to include soils, waters, plants, and animals, or collectively, the land. The Land Ethic, a Sand County Almanac. And now please join me in our mission statement. At South Church, we nurture spiritual growth through worship, learning, and community. We celebrate the worth and dignity of all people, and we inspire one another to act on our faith in the larger community. Have you ever been someplace where it feels like history lives in the air, like a place is alive with it? For me, one of the places I felt that most strongly was in Rome, walking in 2,000 plus years of history at the Forum, the Colosseum, and Palatine Hill. Certain places like this seem to ooze with recollections, the old preserved structures able to readily return you to a prior age. I often lament that this feels lacking in the common world around us here in our home. If we look to the structures around us for a similar feeling, our own South Church is probably the best chance we have, having been built way back in 1826, a whole 5 or 6 generations ago. A quick bit of Googling told me the oldest building in New Hampshire, here in Portsmouth, is the Richmond Jadson House, built circa 1664. This relative youngness can make it feel, and make me feel, like we aren't surrounded by history. And yet we are. This mindset of feeling an absence of history, given the youth of the United States of America, is one I often try to fight and that I dislike in myself, especially because there's a deeper, longer history all around us. Instead of viewing land as a place upon which history is built, I want to hear and internalize the words of Aldo Leopold. I want to view the land as history, view soil, water, plants, animals, that community, the community as history. To view people, all peoples as a present tense history that is alive and links the past to the present and future. Peoples is something I think we miss in our minds and our collectives, even our vocabulary. Leopold was writing from an environmental perspective, but today's environmentalism still struggles to recognize that environmental justice is a people's justice, and therefore peoples are embedded in environmentalism. If I may, I think even we at South Church struggle with recognizing peoples. I wonder who you think about when you say our mission statement. Who do you celebrate without effort when you celebrate the worth and dignity of all people? All people. It should be inclusive, and it sounds inclusive, and it could even be inclusive, but let me offer 2 phrases. A people. It isn't common in English, but I think of a silent A often precedes and singularizes people. A peoples, on the other hand, peoples without an apostrophe, is grammatically incorrect. Peoples is already plural, always plural. This is one of the things I want to celebrate about Indigenous Peoples Day. I think this is inherently hard, but I want to celebrate the worth and dignity of all peoples. I want to act on my faith in the larger community, a community that includes soil, water, plants, animals, land, peoples. I think doing so requires being and recognizing all peoples of the land. Next is an excerpt from Winona Laduke's Wade Lecture at the 2010 UUA General Assembly. This American industrial civilization, it is deafening. It has done much to all of us, and we have become people who live here on this land. So let me tell you a little bit about this land. There is a place where the thunder beings rest in the migration from west to east. There is a place known as the place where the Kachinas and the speakers speak to the Apache people, a place known as the Falls of a Woman's Hair. These are sacred lands and sacred places to all peoples. I am here to suggest that the Holy Land is actually here. What if we deconstructed how we know these places? Instead of being called the place where the thunder being rests in their migration from west to east, up by the city of Thunder Bay, Thunder Mountain it is called, in English translation from Ojibwe. It is known instead as Mount McKay. The place that the Apache people go for their prayers is known not by its traditional name, but instead as Mount Graham. This illustrates to me one of the problems I have with America, which is the naming of large mountains after small men. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I have nothing against men of any size. I've raised quite a few of them. I will continue to. But what I have is a problem with the construct of naming and renaming. The idea that someone got it in their heads that we could take something as immortal as a mountain and name it after something as puny and mortal as a human. And then what that does to our consciousness is that is repeated generation after generation after generation. It changes how we relate to land. So whether it is Thunder Mountain or it is Celio Falls, the falls of a woman's hair, that were inundated or drowned in the Dallas Dam project on the Columbia River, it is important to remember that these are sacred places that require us as humans to recognize them. And in that process, we are able to liberate ourselves because indeed our earth is alive. It is not commodified. It is not named and planted with a flag and claimed. It is a living and spiritual being. It is indeed possible to deconstruct some of that colonialism. For instance, that big rock in Australia used to be called Ayers Rock. I don't know who the Ayers guy was, but if you go to Australia now, it is called Uluru, which is their name for it in their language, which has more power and reflects something that is tens of thousands of years old. And it is even possible to liberate entire countries. You know that Rhodes guy that they named the Rhodes Scholarship after? He didn't even get a rock named after him. He got a country named after him. That was Rhodesia. And that too was liberated with the name Zimbabwe. It is possible to let go of the naming and claiming, to deconstruct some of that, and liberate our minds from the language of empire. And that will be very important if indeed we are to survive. So, for the time for all ages, this is a kind of a combination of a personal story and a story that I learned from Wolfsong, who was an Abenaki storyteller that I grew up with in Burlington, Vermont. And the reason that I chose this story is that Burlington is really home for me, and the subject of this story, Odzihozo, is also feels that home is in that same place. Where I grew up, outside of Burlington, in a small town, is surrounded by mountains and valleys, and everywhere I went, I felt like I had somewhere I always wanted to go all around me, and at the same time, wherever I was also felt sacred and special as well. In particular, one of those places is on the shore of Lake Champlain, where you can look out across the water, feel the calm breezes coming across from the west, and then if you look up, there's the Adirondack Mountains on the other side. And many an evening I would spend in that area sitting and watching as the sun set and slowly the sky turned to orange just over the mountains and then got peachy and a little pink and purple the further away you went. It just felt like the place and the people where I belonged. And it was a very similar thing, as I said, for Odzihozo. Odzihozo is one of those beings that came from very, very early in time. So early that essentially there were no other beings when he created himself out of the land and out of the earth. It took a long time for him to slowly pull himself together out of the earth, to gather it all together and form himself up. But he did this over time. As he did, he made his head and kind of the upper part of him, he kind of started to pull himself up with his arms a bit. He began to look around and he wanted to see more. And he got more and more excited as he was forming himself, pushing himself more and more upright and getting more and more excited about what he wanted to see. He got so excited, in fact, that he wanted to do this before he'd fully formed. Now, I don't know if you've ever felt this way after a very long walk or run or something where you sit down or you lay down afterwards and you get so tired that you feel like your legs are sort of stuck. Well, that's how it was for Odzihozo. His legs had not yet fully formed. They were sort of still in that weird, wiggly, like tadpole kind of form. But he so wanted to see and explore, so he started to push himself up and use his first formed arms. And sometimes you feel like you're almost trying to gather the earth around you in those situations and get yourself up, like if you could just get it higher, maybe you could go somewhere. Well, that's what he did. He pulled the earth around him so that he could pull himself up further and look about. And from this, he created the mountains, the Adirondacks, and the Green Mountains of Vermont. And he got himself so that he could basically sit up, but to pull himself up, his fingers had to dig into those ridges he just formed, and they formed the gaps, what's now known as Lincoln Gap and Bristol Gap and Smuggler's Notch, the passes between the Green Mountains. And he pulled himself up more and more until eventually his legs had basically formed, and he was more or less upright, but still pulling himself up that much. He had to scratch his hands down those hills on the side to get himself up and form the rivers, the Winooski, the Onion River, the Lamoille. Eventually he got himself up. He finally was able to go explore. Then he wandered for his time. He enjoyed it. He saw many places, but that home, it pulled him back. He wanted to see again where he'd come from. When he returned, he saw that he must have left a great depression from where he had been, but that depression had filled in. Where his legs had been, there were two stretches of water, and they came together where his torso and his head was. In the middle, there were the islands, and those islands are Grand Isle and South Hero, the islands in the middle of Lake Champlain, and his body, where it had been, formed the Great Lake there. He liked that spot so much, eventually he just sat in that lake and watched. He watched as the other creatures came into being and the people, they formed themselves and gathered on the shore. He liked it so much that slowly the earth he'd formed himself from turned to rock and settled into the lake. And it's still there. Odzihozo still lives just outside Shelburne Bay in rock form now, in what is now known as Rock Thunder. And that's our story today. Thank you for listening. I've always believed a key to successful change is successful planning and organization. This is what the Granite State Organizing Project, our shared plate recipient for the month, does. The Granite State Organizing Project unites groups like South Church Social Justice Associates and other faith-based groups, union organizers, and groups like One Fair Wage to strengthen our collective voices in decisions that affect our communities by taking actions on issues such as poor housing, failing schools, barriers to citizenship, unjust working conditions, and costly health care that put our neighbors at risk. I also want to lift up the Kawasuk peoples and say that you can also go to kawasuk.org and donate there if you'd like to support their efforts as well. Thank you for taking that moment of silence with us to offer your supports. While my default is to associate places of history with buildings, my default places of prayer are the mountains and the shores and the old-growth forests. I invite you to go now in your mind's eye to your places of prayer, closing your eyes if it aids you. I'll spend some time there as well, describing the scene. With me, I welcome you to come with me or to travel wherever your mind takes you. To help with the tranquility of your travels, I invite you to deepen your breathing, lengthening the duration of your inhalation and your exhalation, letting your body take its time and giving your mind the freedom to travel. Joseph Campbell said, "Your sacred space is where you can find yourself over and over again. As you find yourself, as you wish, allowing your breathing to return to its natural rhythm." When I close my eyes, I find myself listening to the late night waves wash up on the shore of the beaches of Fripp Island in South Carolina. A warm wind flows over the ocean, up to me, over my face, and through my hair. As the moon dances on the swells, the wind whispers in my ears. Slowly, the whisper grows louder, and I find the wind growing until I'm now peering down from a ridge into a deep valley. Clouds are rushing up and over the treeless ridge leading to Mount Lafayette in Franconia Notch. Slowly, the clouds rise, and the sun breaks through, bringing a crisp, sparkling illumination to the evergreens far below. I feel like I can differentiate every needle. These are some of my sacred spaces and places. I pray for the sanctity of these places, that the awe they inspire in me remains for those yet to come, that others can feel as alive in the world and feel the flow of life and energy around them. I pray for a continued balance and diversity of life for you and all your relations. I pray we find the peace of the world and carry it with us with open eyes as we return to the world.
Quai Nidobach, Indelawasin Denise Pouliot, Sagama Squaw. Wood Delawasin, Paul Pouliot, Sagamo, Kawasuk Band of the Pennacook Abnaki people. Neona Aiyan Odana Kuanipi. Hello, friends. My name is Denise Pouliot, and I'm the head female speaker, and this is Paul Pouliot, head male speaker and chief of the Kawasuk Band of the Pennacook Abnaki people. We are from our ancient Pennacook village of Odanakuanipi village at the narrowing of the waters on Lake Winnipesaukee, which is now known as Alton, New Hampshire. We stand here today to welcome you to Piscataqua, which translates to a branched river, a tidal watershed. Today, this place is known as Portsmouth and the Piscataqua River located within Ndakina. Ndakina is the unceded traditional ancestral homelands and waterways of the Pennacook, Abenaki, and Wabanaki peoples past and present. We honor with gratitude the lands, waterways, air, flora, fauna, and all our ancestors, the Alnambak, human beings, who have stewarded our homelands of Ndakina throughout the countless generations for over 13,000 years. 13,000 years of Alnambak stewarding the same sacred place for countless generations, and still here today following those traditions, living, surviving, growing, adapting, and continually building connections to our Earth Mother. Our ancestors watched the megafauna walk and live on this land. We know this because we have words in our traditional and ancient language that still exist for these extinct animals, such as mastodons, bison, camels, and lions. We not only survived among these great life forms, we thrived beyond their eventual extinction. We learned about our homelands, the waters, plants, rocks, and other living beings among us. We learned how to take care of our environment and how our environment took care of us. We saw how we are all connected and dependent upon each other, how every action has a reaction, and how that could hurt or help our future generations.
We understood that if we respected the life and land where we live, then the land will continue to provide for our well-being and for future generations. We learned and lived in harmony with our surroundings, just like Creator intended. We understood we lived in Eden, and we needed to protect our Earth Mother so she could always provide for us. For thousands of years, for countless generations, we followed Creator's instructions and lived here on Ndakina in peace. Then, in 1452, half a world away, a papal decree was issued by Pope Nicholas V that specifically sanctioned and promoted the conquest, colonization, and exploitation of non-Christian territories and peoples. This decree of domination and cultural hatred changed the course of world history. Here in the Ndakina, little did we know or understand what that would mean to us, our families and homes, and what this meant for our Eden, our Mother Earth. How could anyone understand that the actions of one person with no relationship to this place or people could dictate the domination and annihilation of us Alnambak and condone abusing and extracting the resources of our Earth Mother? By 1530, our ancestors met countless visitors off these coasts. Britons, Normans, Basque, Portuguese, and other fishing people of our waters to feed the European capitalism and greed. By 1550, the French joined in the fishing expeditions with the others, and by 1578, it is recorded that the competition grew to 50 English ships, 100 Spanish, and 150 French fishing boats that were reported in this area alone off our Georges banks. We don't have ship counts for the other nations, but it was significant. Each of these foreign nations were fighting over the natural resources and domination of an area that they themselves were invading. Their greed was insatiable. Then the kings and queens of Europe heard about the fish in our waters and the trees that covered our Eden. They had already destroyed the European Eden Creator had gifted them to live on. So now they were set their eyes on stealing and destroying our bit of heaven. It was only a matter of time before European capitalism and greed extended onto our shores and quickly moved deeper into our homelands.
Here on Ndakina, we had early contact with European fishermen, then the land-seeking explorers, followed by the Jesuits in 1609. From our early contact with the Jesuit, we find our best descriptions of us as Alnambak. Through the Jesuit diaries, they identified us as pious, righteous, and deeply spiritual. We were monotheistic, fully clothed, not like other regional inhabitants. We had a strong matriarchal society. We were multilingual, speaking French, English, and Latin. We understood Christianity. We debated and interpreted the Bible, and had a strong democratic governance based on consensus decision-making. All community decisions were based on the three truths of peace, righteousness, and empowerment. The Jesuits identified us as the Wabanaki, the ancient ones, from the place where the white light, or wobi, of the new day's sun comes above the water and upon the land, hence the people of the Dawnland. The Lenape Delaware refer to themselves as the grandparents of the original people of the Algonquin, but they call the Wabanaki the ancient ones that came before them. Their older ancestors, Paleo-Indigenous Ice Age ancestors, we called ourselves Alnambak, human beings. Then in 1620, the Puritans landed in Wampanoag territory, and to us here at Piscataqua in 1623. The new inhabitants landing on Indakina were weak, and they lacked the knowledge to survive here. We pitied them. We taught them how to grow and gather food, how to hunt, our medicinal ways, everything needed to survive here during our unforgiving winters. Few people know that the hunting and fishing laws and practices that we adhere to today are all based on our Abenaki traditions and ancestral knowledge.
In the 1630s, the Massachusetts Bay banned all indigenous religious activities, such as powwows, because the Puritans saw these as paganism and our dancing as immoral. Furthermore, in 1647, Jesuit priests were banned from the colony as well on penalty of death. Eventually, the Massachusetts laws even went so far as to identify the Abenaki as enemy combatants that could be executed or sold into slavery if we came into Boston. These laws remained on the books until 2005. I was often reminded of these laws when I testified before the Massachusetts legislature in the 1990s. In 1689, Jesuit priest Father Sebastian Real arrived in North America and established a mission at the ancient Abenaki village of Norridgewock, which was on the Kennebec River. The mission and village lasted until August 24th, 1724, when the British sent the militia from Boston to kill Father Real and to destroy the Abenaki community once and for all, and to drive off any remaining Abenaki to the north. Real's diary stated that we were very religious, believing in only one God, using water for purification rituals, and using smudges for prayers, such like Catholic practices. Our supreme being, the Creator, the great mystery of life, or God as we would call him today, was neither a man nor woman, which is why we think of the Creator as the greater mystery of life. After Christian contact, we created religious words for Christian acceptance. The Christian God, which we're told was a man, was Tolobadak, which translates to the male God or Lord Master. Jesus Christ was Sazos, and the Holy Spirit in the heavens or sky was Nuwaskomikok or Sahok. Jesuits such as Father Vitramil asserted that their sentiments and principles of justice had no parallel amongst the other tribes, and that they were never known to have been treacherous nor wanting in honor or a conscience in fulfilling their word given even in public or private treaty. While we may properly agree and regard this may be too much praise, we must admit that they possessed a nobility of character remarkable in a savage people. It is certain that the missionaries found them more tractable and more readily able to listen to their teachings than any other branch of the Algonquin family with which they came in contact.
Both men and women are uniformly described as being modest. And perhaps the most remarkable thing to be recorded in favor of the Abenaki warrior is the fact that no female prisoner ever had occasion to complain of him. Vitramil records the important fact that the Abenaki, and that they alone of the Algonquin family, possessed the art of chirography, handwriting, and he gives specimens of characters employed by them, which strikingly reminds one of the ancient phonetic script of Egypt and Phoenicia. He further states that the people were accustomed to send missives to one another written upon birch bark, and the chiefs to dispatch written circulars of the same material to their warriors, asking for advice. Indeed, the Abnaki asserted that their method of writing expressed ideas as fully and as freely of that employed by Europeans. The Abnaki call this a wikigan. To the contrary, most historical narratives that were documented within the English colonial framework were of wars and resulting acts of retribution, a complete contradiction to the Jesuit narrative. Colonial Massachusetts was firmly Puritan and dialectically opposed to the Church of Rome and their missionaries, the Jesuits. This put the Abnaki in the center of this royal European religious conflict. It was noted in Jesuit records that the Abnaki did not understand how the Roman Catholic identified us as civilized, but the Puritans called us papists and children of the devil. It was also noted that the Puritans, except for Reverend John Eliot of the Natick Mass Praying Indian Village, never attempted to speak to us about the Bible or to convert us to Christianity. The English Puritans only wanted to talk about our lands and how they could use and control them for their own purposes. European wars were waged in Europe and North America because of the royal conflicts that were set in motion by the 1452 papal bulls. There were 9 wars fought on these lands beginning in 1675 with the King Philip's War and ending at the conclusion of the War of 1812. The U.S. Constitution explicitly excluded the indigenous population. Since its adoption, there have been 19 laws and acts that have direct impact. Here are a few.
In 1790, when the country was first being formed, they created the Non-Intercourse Act. It was to preserve indigenous lands here in the Northeast, but it was never honored. It was always modified through history. In 1823, the Supreme Court confirmed the 1452 Papal Bull Doctrine of Discovery, and they used that to grant the U.S. plenary authority over indigenous lands. Even in 1920, the Commission of Indian Affairs, Charles Burke, issued 2 directives against Indian dancing in 1921 and 1923. This further instilled the legal process to deny indigenous people the right to practice their own religion, and that policy continued to 1978. We weren't given our civil rights until 1968 when the Indian Civil Rights Act was created. We also weren't allowed to pray until 1978 when the American Indian Religious Freedom Act was enacted, and we were finally allowed to pray in public. In 1978, we also were, for the first time, allowed to protect our children with the Indian Child Welfare Act, which prevented people from taking our children off reservations and putting them in mission schools. And in 1990, the Native American Graves and Protection and Repatriation Act allowed us to bury our own ancestors and those ancestors which were dug up and put in museums. Now we come up to the present day. Our Kawasaki band petitioned the U.S. for acknowledgement, and we received official notification of our petition in the Federal Register in 1995. We did this as a result of the contemporary laws that had a direct impact on us in this time and today. We maintain a declaration of our pre-colonial tribal status under provisions of self-determination. We're currently listed as a tribal consulting party in regard to state and federal consulting activities that impact all Indigenous people. We have been religious advisors for the Department of Justice since 2002, and we have received recognition for that service with an award in 2017. We are highly active within the historical and Indigenous education with the establishment of Indigenous New Hampshire Collaborative Collective and the University of New Hampshire Native American Indigenous Studies minor. We work in partnership with numerous organizations working within environmental justice, food insecurity, land conservation, race and equity, and community building, to name a few.
This year, the Nature Conservancy recognized us as one of the 60 organizations that have positively impacted the natural world in honor of the TNC's 60 years of conservation in New Hampshire. The University of New Hampshire Sustainability Institute awarded us their Platinum Sustainability Award for Community Development in 2021. We are all Alnambach, human beings, all created by a mysterious life-giving force that we call Creator, Kitsi Nawask. Creator made us all equal, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender identity, or the host of other identifications that we have no right to make. Creator created us all to live in balance with all things, including our Mother Earth. We are one people, and as such must follow Creator's intended purpose to live together in peace. It is through the work of communication, cooperation, and sustainability that we maintain our families, our culture, our community, our planet. We encourage you all to continue in the ways of our ancestors by continuing to connect with each other, to learn, to show compassion, to help and to empower each other, but most of all, continue to love each other. Katsi Oleoni Katsi Nawask, Taon the Mikwal Daminana, Olido Gowangan, Oleoni. Great thanks, Creator, and we remember still. Thanks to all our relations. Thank you. As we conclude, we will be singing a traditional Abenaki song honoring the land and Creator. We will sing in Dakina, which translates to our homelands. Thanks to all our relations. Thanks to the great mystery of life, the Creator.
Nandakina, away, away. Holy, yo, wong, gone, away. Holy, get seen a wasp. Nandakina, away, away. Holy, go on, away. All you need to see no what's. All you need to see no what's.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you.